I had this moment with him a few months ago where he said, "Can you see them over there?" And he's looking at a blank wall. And I said, "Who are you looking at, Dad?" And he said, "All the people, can't you see them?" And he said, "Oh, I can't see their faces. I'm not close enough yet."
Wow.
Hello and welcome to It's a Death Sentence podcast. I'm Emma Skipp.
I'm Carrie Smith.
And here we are again, talking about death.
And life.
And life. Actually, yeah, that
what a bitch it is.
Yeah. So we've recorded a couple of episodes back to back because I've lost my dad in the last month and Carrie has lost her dear brother. Couldn't fucking write it for two women that do a podcast on death, could you?
I know.
I know.
Terrible.
8 or 9 days apart, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of being authentic, then we should talk about our own experiences. So
Let's talk about death.
let's talk about death, baby.
So today we're going to talk about your lovely dad,
Yeah.
Pete Skipp.
Yeah, Pete Skipp, absolutely.
Can you tell us about Pete? Tell us a little bit about him.
So Dad was, a very kind, gentle spirit, very funny and massively intelligent. A lot of people didn't know that about him. I mean, they knew he was intelligent, but he was super intelligent.
A beautiful singer.
And a beautiful singer, yeah. So we've just had his funeral. So today is, what day is today, Carrie, darling? Is it Tuesday?
It's Monday.
It's Monday, good. So we had his funeral Thursday, just gone. But I think in grief, you lose all sense of time. And, before you know it, a week has passed and 2 weeks have passed and then it's a month. It's a month today. And you can't quite get your breath. So, yeah, let's go back to that question, what kind of a man he was. He was, an excellent human being. He set a great example to how a man should be.
Yeah.
That sounds terribly, traditionalist, if you like. But yeah, he just was a good, kind spirit. He was a really good person and very interesting,
With toilet humour.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, nothing made him laugh more than an enormous fart. We've got a picture in front of us. This is what we had on his coffin in the funeral, the picture of him doing what he
Post-fart.
looks like he's crying, but that is the moment, that photograph, I'll put it on the podcast, that Sophie's, my sister's partner, took a picture of Dad just after he farted, and that's the face.
I mean, what a gentle soul.
Just cry. For somebody who could be so deeply philosophical, that made him cry more than anything else. So,
Love that. Love that about him.
As children, my sister and I have got quite a big age gap. There's 9 years between us. So we both had quite a different experience of Dad. He was an amazing dad, very hands-on. For anybody that has listened to any of our podcasts who actually all knew my mum, she was quite a bombastic character, certainly eccentric, and he often stood way in the shadow of whatever.
Quietly confident in the background.
Yeah. Or just hiding, one of the two. hiding
from Julie.
Having a cigarette out of the extractor van. But yeah, so sadly, Dad actually died quite suddenly and it was very shocking, although he was in hospital. But he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So my dad lived with me in this house. He had an annex. We bought it together about 10 years ago. But he lived in a nursing home for the last 2 years.
So when did Dad get dementia? When was he diagnosed?
Well, he lived here and I started to see him make mistakes. Now, when you think he's died at age 77, which is actually not that old these days, but I think I had him diagnosed when he was about 73.
Right.
So, but I had to fight for it, Carrie. I had to really fight for it. When I first took him to the doctors, they do these cognitive tests. Anybody who is listening to this who's got a relative with Alzheimer's will know these cognitive tests. And my advice so strongly would be is if you disagree with it in any way, challenge it and get a second opinion, because I think the quicker
you get fobbed off.
Yeah,
you?
you do. And I don't want to sort of point fingers, but in this situation, that's what happened. But because I lived with my dad, I was in that quite unique position as an adult living with a parent. It was a shared house, but he had his own annex. But I'd start. So there's sort of weird things that happen with dementia and Alzheimer's, where there's general forgetfulness that you will see in somebody who's aging, that's normal.
Or menopausal.
Or menopausal in my case. The fact that I got some kind of cognitive issues, I can't remember fucking anything, including what day it is, as it turns out. So, but yeah, he started to do some quite strange things. I took him for the first load of tests and they were like, no, we're quite happy. I mean, I watched him draw a clock backwards and they were like, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with him.
Right.
And I was livid because I knew.
Yeah.
I knew.
You know your dad.
I spend time with this man, and he's doing things like making lots of drinks and leaving them around, or like forgetting that he'd eaten and stuff like that. But he actually lived with this diagnosis. Once we did get him diagnosed, I got him diagnosed properly within about a year of that. And because I fucking fought for it, I lost my temper and...
You, darling.
Yeah, I really did. I'd had enough, I think we've mentioned this in other podcasts, but I've got,
They've fallen out.
Anger issues with...
Fallen out with the
systems.
NHS previously.
Yeah, previously on Emma, she did fall out with the NHS. But I realise they're systems that are flawed and not
people.
Oh, but actually sometimes it's people. Yeah. They're flawed and they make mistakes. And that's also allowed. It happens. Especially if they're doing 12 or 13-hour fucking shifts. I mean, what do they expect?
Yeah. Normally a flawed system employs flawed people. And
it
makes a great big fuck up.
Yeah, it really does. But once he was diagnosed, he still lived here with me for several years. And he sort of went downhill quite slowly. They did put him on a drug, I think it was called glutamine, something like that, where they said it's got some clinical studies that show it can slow the progression of Alzheimer's.
Right.
And how do you quantify that? How do you know? Because he could have just had a slow progression anyway.
Yes, you don't know.
You don't know, but he took that drug, and so he kind of gradually went downhill. I mean, we did have 1 week here where he had 3 car accidents in a week.
Wow.
So and the thing is about my dad is he was a gracious man and rarely put up a fight, rarely raised his voice. And I just went into his side of the house and said, Dad, I think it's time. We had your licence. And he gave it up willingly. He handed it over to me. And, God love him, he just was good about things like that, really.
Oh, few tips.
Yes, just...
It's happy memories, though, as well. I mean, it's worth saying here that, dementia affects loads and loads of people, and dementia's not a single disease. It's an umbrella heading for all different things. And in the UK, 982,000 people in the UK have got dementia.
I think it's
in one way or another, which is massive. And like you said, it largely affects memory, thinking, language, cognitive function.
Yeah. I mean, I sent him out to Tesco's one day. It's a great story. This is literally just before I had his licence off him, and you have to surrender it to DVLA and stuff like that. He went to there's what we call the big Tesco, so it's a 6-mile journey or whatever. And he just came home. He didn't get there.
Oh.
He'd forgotten the way.
He'd forgotten the way.
So those are the really telling things.
Yeah.
That unless you've had an experience of Alzheimer's and dementia, I was really on it. I was so on it because I was like, I'd seen it before. A lot of people aren't, and they're actually diagnosed very late when they're doing really strange things, which he then did later on.
Which can be harmful to them.
And it's so unsafe.
Yeah.
It's so unsafe, When he had a short term in a flat near here before he went into the nursing home where I had care staff go in. And, I turned up one day and he was outside in his underpants and with bare feet in the winter, and the carer was leaving. And I pulled up, and I think I was so shocked because my dad isn't that kind of person. He's quite a private person.
Yeah.
I was so shocked to find him in this situation that it didn't occur to me that they were leaving. And then this woman sort of tumbles out of a car and starts going on to me about, why he won't put his clothes on and stuff like that. And it was only afterwards I thought, well, it's your fucking job.
Yeah, make him.
Don't let him stand outside in the freezing cold because he's going to injure himself, Yeah,
or make him safe and keep him warm. Yeah. If he won't get dressed, make sure he's in the house.
Bring me and I'll come down, But again, anybody that is in that situation in social care with an elderly parent or whatever will know that that again is a flawed system, and you have to be incredibly proactive in it. You have to be incredibly proactive in it.
And you have to know that they're rolling their eyes at you every time
and you have
come
to be
in.
okay with it.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with being that person, because otherwise you will not get it done. It will not go in your favour. But so then he had 2 years in a nursing home close to here. And I've said to you earlier while we were walking how, I've had a month now since Dad has died, and I've had moments where I've really cried, and it's been very emotional, and the funeral was really beautifully done. And actually, I found myself thinking, why am I not crying more? How am I going to bed at night? I've had a few moments where I've woke up in the night and cried. But and the answer is, I have been grieving my dad for years.
Yeah. I mean, dementia is, they call it the long goodbye, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people feel that grief before their loved one has passed.
Yeah.
Because it's like grieving the loss of who they were, grieving the loss of the role in their life, like they're no longer the wife or the daughter, they're then the carer.
Yeah.
And then them forgetting who, they can sometimes forget who you are. I mean,
I feel very, very, very grateful in some ways. About 6 months ago, my sister and I had a very candid conversation. And again, there'll be people listening to this that might judge me on this, but we said, I hope he is taken by something else. Because he had prostate cancer some years ago, which we think was on its way back. And then we were like, we hope it's a heart attack or an embolism or something quick, fast. Because the alternative is we continue to watch him demise. And I had a couple of occasions with him where he struggled with not really who I was, but he was in a different plane, if you know what I mean. He sometimes would look beyond you.
Like he's there, but the lights are on, but nobody's home.
And I feel like I probably could do many episodes around my dad's demise and his life, because his life was fucking brilliant and interesting. But I feel like some of the most poignant parts of his death. So I sat with Dad about, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago in the nursing home. And he was having one of these moments where he was not quite connected to what we were talking about. So he would talk to you, he was quite lucid, and then he'd drift off, and we were at a point with him where regularly he would ring and tell me all about him selling a house, or something that happened at his workplace 25 years ago, very coherently, but it's obviously completely wrong. And, there's no point in arguing with somebody who's having this conversation, you just go along with it. So that was really sad to get used to. And I'd come off the phone and be really sad that I'd had to talk to him about something that wasn't real or what hadn't been real for years.
And did you used to just sort of go along with his memory?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Unless he was distressed, we went along with it.
You didn't orientate him to time and place?
Only when he got distressed about any financial things or where he was, if he felt frightened, then I'd say, so I've got a piece of writing. I might get it out actually and read it to you, but I wrote him something and he had it in his room and it said, Dear Daddy, you are safe. If something's happening in your life, I'll maybe dig it out and read it, try and reflect.
So sort of like orientated him so he knew where he was.
Back
in the room, yeah.
But I had this moment with him a few months ago where he said, can you see them over there? And he's looking at a blank wall. And I said, who are you looking at, Dad? And he said, all the people, can't you see them? I said, well, do you recognise any of their faces? And he said, I can't see their faces. I'm not close enough yet.
Wow.
And I remember sitting there and it was quite chilling in a way to be present for, he was hallucinating. He did this a lot, but he also, in his absolute total cognitive capacity as a functioning adult before he was ill, was interested in things like hypnosis and astral projection and stuff that took you out of your body, and transcendental analysis with my mom and religion and deeply philosophical. So when somebody like that tells you there's a portal to another world opposite their door, my actual immediate thought was, that's not Alzheimer's, that's my dad.
Yeah.
So for all the carers that were like, oh, he's in a bit of a different world today, I used to think, is he though? You just don't know him,
Yeah.
But he went into A&E the week he died. He went in on the Wednesday. He was absolutely awful on the Thursday. He was delirious. It was a bit of a shit show, if I'm honest. But he said something to me And he also said exactly the same thing to my sister at a different time on the Friday. This is the day he died. He looked at me. So the day he died, he actually had gone full circle, was coherent, looking at us, knew who we were, was talking, had started to eat again. He stood up, he walked around the house. He was moved to a different ward. The OT rang me. So everything pointed towards him.
He's getting better.
He's getting better.
I remember I texted you and said, and you said, he's improved. And I was like, great, these things are looking up.
Didn't even occur to me. But he did say, I was holding his hand. He was agitated in the hospital, but you would be, because, you're often left in a weird position, especially if you're infirm, and the care could be better.
And the noise it's everything about a hospital environment can be distressing.
Yeah, it is very noisy. But he held my hand and he said, your mum's here with Malcolm. And Malcolm was a friend of my mum's, he's also dead. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, he's the gatekeeper.
Gosh.
And I just sat, and I was stood actually, and I just looked at him and I thought, okay. But because I'd got used to Dad saying these types of things, perhaps not as poignant as that, but these types of things, but the way he said it to me. But anyhow, so that night we got this, I'd left his bedside and 45 minutes later he was dead. And we got a call telling us to go back in. They don't tell you he's died. They just
skirt around it.
Fucking skirt around it in a absolutely, I can't even describe way. And
sounds like they were shocked.
They were.
Yeah, they weren't expecting.
Yeah, they also tried to resuscitate him despite him having a
DNA.
Yeah. And I'm grateful he actually didn't come back, because I think he would have lost more of his quality of life and his cognitive capacity, because he was found unresponsive. So whether it'd have caused more trauma to his brain, I don't know. But I've been told it probably wouldn't have been good. So my sister and I sat with him, and he had died. It's so unbelievable, because I'd been in that room an hour before.
Yeah.
I'd come home and eaten my tea and turned around and gone back.
Yeah.
And so when I first saw him, I was quite frightened, because even though we're doing this podcast on death and you see dead people every day, I don't.
Yes.
I fucking don't.
And it's very different seeing somebody that you know who's dead.
And when my mum died, I was with her. So I was gutted that I wasn't with my dad. Gutted that he died on his own. So we went in, and they'd obviously tidied him up a bit, and so his head was tipped back a bit, but his eyes were still slightly open, and all these kinds of things. But so we sat there, me and Sophie, and I think this, it gets very vague, but I think this is when we had the conversation that he'd actually said to Sophie, your mum's here. She's with Malcolm and he's the gatekeeper. So he'd said the same thing to her at a different point.
Do you think that when he mentioned it previously, he was...
So in his room?
Yeah. He was saying, I'm not close enough, I can't see who they are. Yeah. And then when he mentioned it, he could see who they were.
Oh, no, he also said on the Friday, I've missed this bit out. So Sophie did the day shift on the Friday and her partner Pete, and then I went in the evening, and we'd both done the Thursday. But on the Friday, Dad was out of bed. They got him back into bed and he was distressed. And he said, look, but I can see them, I can touch them. Like basically saying he wanted to go to this thing he could see.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking, yeah. And also he was quite a magical man.
And they do say that, we've heard lots of people say that somebody comes for them.
Yeah.
And lots of, I think
he's the gatekeeper, for God's sake.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Good old Malcolm.
Good old Malcolm. I would have thought he would be gatekeeper, but there you go. The guy had MS and walked with 2 sticks, would have been hard, but perhaps in
he was spiritual.
Perhaps he didn't. But yeah, so it's just been a whirlwind, and obviously we've just had the funeral, and I think what happens, you've got your brother's funeral, we'll be there this week, won't we? But what happens after a funeral is what we've decided to do on the podcast is we're going to do some how-to guides. We're going to
as we are now professionals,
because we're now professionals. I've done it so many bloody times, but there's all these real practicalities. So somebody dies, and you get very sad, but actually you were launched in like a fucking rocket ship to
organise
deal with stuff, right? okay, so he's going to go to the hospital mortuary and you'll need to organise this and that. And you're like, okay. And then you need this form so that the undertaker can come and blah, 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 blah. And then you've got to have the death certificate before we can do this. And it goes like, so we're going to do some how-to guides, I think, based on this, because lots of people don't know how to do this. And it's complicated.
Especially when you're trying to grieve and, you know.
But I think this is the one thing I do remember about after Mum died, or after the friends I've lost have died, is the funeral comes and it goes, and you have so many practicalities that you've got to do, and then it stops. It just stops. So no longer do I have to visit my dad. No longer do I have to screen 14 calls a day, and then have really nonsense conversations with him. It's gone. No longer have I got to plan what's happening. Is my sister going to see him at the weekend? That's all gone. There's no funeral things to take care of. All of your beautiful, wonderful friends that come and bring flowers and cards and everything, they've gone.
They go on with their life, don't they? And it's not that they don't care, but they have, life goes on. Life.
I think when somebody that you love dies, you think, how is the world continuing to spin? Why are people still getting in their cars and going to work? Don't they know my grief?
And you see someone laughing and you think, you bloody cow.
Well, this is the whole thing about This Is Grief, the campaign. I want to, we've started it a bit with the podcast, but I just found that grief it manifests in so many different things, that if you look at an average photograph that you have taken of yourself or a situation after you've lost someone, even if it's 10 years later, there's a part of you that's in that photograph that is still lost. You talked about, I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but you talked about you've lost half of yourself in a way. That's the only other person with that DNA. I think you carry that grief with you in one way or another forevermore. I don't want to pontificate that you can get rid of grief, because I don't think you can.
No.
What you do is you learn to manage it.
We were sent a little book, weren't we, about kiddies' grief, and actually
we're going to do a review
on it, and the illustrator sort of had it quite perfectly, didn't it? In the background there's that little shadowed out person who still is at every event.
Beautifully done, actually. In fact, we will do that review.
Yes, we're going to do that review, and that'll come up soon. But I mean, dementia and Alzheimer's, it's crucial that we understand it. Diagnosis is crucial so that people can understand how to care for those people. And you were so hot on it, hot on what your dad was normally like.
Yeah. I think because
there's no cure.
There's no cure. My advice would be, if in doubt, check it out for everything, any ailment, but particularly around Alzheimer's, because you will know much more than the medical professional, because you know that person. If you think your parent has Alzheimer's or dementia or is having cognitive problems, you will probably be right. That would be my advice.
And as well, it happens to people who are younger. It doesn't just happen to somebody who is maybe over 60. It happens to sometimes younger adults.
There's a couple of people in Dad's home that was on respite that were probably in their 50s.
Yeah, I've seen it before in the 50s. So you're looking for things like memory loss, thinking and reasoning problems. They can't reason properly.
Yeah, somebody explained it to me. That was a brilliant. Dot, who lives down the road, I think her mother-in-law had dementia, but she said to me, is a really good sort of not an analogy, but like something. So like when you come out of the supermarket and you forget where you park your car.
Yeah.
Right. So we all do this because we've constantly taken in information, cognitively having to sort it out. And so our brains go, that's less important, I've got to process all the stuff that's important. So that type of forgetfulness is normal, and that becomes more ramped up as you get older. She said, when you come out of the supermarket and you can't remember what colour your car is, that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
So if you are with somebody that you suspect is having those types of, you suspect dementia or Alzheimer's, then I would definitely look out for things that are more apparent like that.
What about mood changes?
Yeah, so with my dad, we were very, very lucky. So we didn't get those mood changes, but I've got 2 or 3 friends whose parents, their dads actually, and they went quite violent.
Yeah.
It can happen. It can be quite common, can be quite aggressive. He was certainly shorter-tempered at times.
Yeah.
But, and that was more unusual, but he was so gentle in his way.
Manner.
Yeah.
There are other things to look out for, like not being able to find the right words for things.
Yes.
So saying the wrong thing and
Or hesitancy, finding a word as well.
Or difficulty just with their daily tasks, like sort of the things they do every day, like making a cup of tea.
Getting to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're more, for me, those are things that you'd see further down the line. But like I said earlier, unless you've seen it before or you know what you're looking for, you may just put a lot of those types of things down to old age. Yeah. Whereas actually there is quite a big difference. And if you're spending a lot of time with that person, I think that if you've got the sense that something is wrong, you're probably right.
I remember working once years and years ago in a home for people with dementia, and so one of the nurses explaining to me that this little lady, she was really distressed, desperately trying to get out of the building, because they're locked buildings to stop people wandering off and whatever. And me being young, thinking, oh God, why is she so upset? And she said to me, if somebody said to you, you've got to pick your child up for school, but you're locked in this room, you can't go, you would be beside yourself thinking about your poor child waiting for you at school and nobody going to get them. And that is what she's remembering. She's remembering that she's got a little baby and she needs to get out and get that baby, and we're stopping her. And that is why she's aggressive, and that is why she's upset and angry. And it's just having that understanding, because it is so hard to put yourself in that position.
Yeah, I think, you see, it's a bit like drinking, isn't it? When people drink and they say, oh, I can't drink that, it makes me aggressive. I always think, no, your aggression makes you aggressive.
Yeah, you're aggressive
anyway. That's just the catalyst. So if you look at it like that, why didn't my dad go aggressive? Because he wasn't aggressive in his personality. So if you were somebody that, went down that route, you're more likely to go down that route. I think it's like your own traits of your personality get ramped up a bit, I think. Oh, and also, I spoke with a carer a couple of times, maybe different carers as well, about the fall, as in not actually having a physical fall, but the fall from having capacity to not having cognitive capacity. The more intelligent a person is, the further the fall is.
Yes, absolutely.
And so within my dad's nursing home, and we were very blessed, Sophie and I fought for him to go to a really good one. But there was a judge in there, there was a funeral director somebody had run a funeral director's business. So people who had been business owners, who were involved in the law, there was a police officer, these were all quite intelligent people. So there seemed to be this kind of common thread with these people who've ended up with Alzheimer's, that they were fantastically intelligent people in their...
It's crazy, isn't it?
In their younger life, so...
But I mean, the Alzheimer's and the dementia, yes, it was part of him towards the end, and yes, that happened to him, but that doesn't make us the man, does it? He was very much more than that.
Yeah.
And regardless of the fact he had Alzheimer's or dementia and he died, that wasn't his cause of death. But he, he is still a massive loss. And I think, there comes that little bit of guilt with it, doesn't it, as well? If he's in a home and you feel like, could I have done more? Could I have done this?
God, the guilt is like, even this morning I just thought, well, could have gone every day. I could have gone every day. But it was so depressing, Gary. It was so... I'd drive there in tears. I'd sit there in tears, and I'd come home in tears, because I'm talking to somebody that I know and love and don't recognise as who they were. And so you end up sitting there, like just chewing the fat, just talking absolute shit to this person you know is so much better than that. And I know it brought him peace, us visiting, but it didn't bring me peace. It brought me absolute horror most of the fucking time. I even hated getting in the building. I'd walk in and I'd be shouted at by other people that have lost their minds, or wolf whistled at by a woman every time I went. It was really odd. And, so you will give yourself a hard time. You always do, because I think, of every time he rang me and I didn't pick up the phone, there are over 100 voicemails on my phone from my dad that I can't listen to, because sometimes he didn't say anything at all. He'd forgot that he'd rang me. And sometimes he'd be going on about, something that happened 25 years ago. And you get to a point, and what I'd say is, although I'm feeling guilty about it, is you can't possibly deal with that day in and day out when you've got 2 young children in your own life.
You have to protect yourself as much
he once rang me 25 times in a day. I counted it.
It's a lot.
And you can't do it, but it is really hard. It's really hard, because it's when if you lose somebody to cancer, if you lose somebody to another illness that is just a physical illness, you watch the demise of that person and you can be present and it's still painful to watch. But this is really different because it's so challenging. It's like being with like a child or being with somebody you hardly know. And then you get these little brief moments of lucidity and they come out with something really fucking profound. And you're like, there you are. And then, he'll say, can you see that dog? Why is there
and then
a
you're
dog?
gone again.
Why is there a dog? Once I was sat there and he told me there was a dog sat next to me. And I was like, well, there probably is in your world. But so I just agreed. And I said, I don't know whose dog it is,
Yeah. And then in the next moment, they're gone again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he'd be, look at me and say, oh, thanks for visiting. I didn't know you were coming. And I'd have been there an hour.
Yeah. It's horribly hard. Well, and the guilt, obviously you can't let it eat you up. And anybody who's in your situation, we do have that, oh God, is this going to be my life now? I'm just constantly going to be up and down to appointments with you. And, and we have that sort of almost a little bit of resentment.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
And it isn't until they're gone that then we sit and think, oh, why didn't I?
Well, I think he lived 3 miles up the road from me. And obviously, I wasn't very well last year and I couldn't drive for 4 months, but I also couldn't tell my dad I wasn't very well. I couldn't say to him, Dad, I think they think I've had a stroke or, whatever was going on, because he would have panicked. He wouldn't have understood. And then he would have forgotten. Yeah. So I'd have had to tell him again and again, And sadly, he's died while my sister's pregnant as well. But she felt he would. She had a feeling that he would. So
crazy.
There's all sorts of things that go on, isn't there? But I think, we could probably do several episodes on Alzheimer's and dementia and have other guests on.
Yes.
Because I think it is, like you've said, the amount of people that it affects in the UK alone.
I remember we went to
they give you a pack when you come out of the doctor's. Here you go. There's some paperwork. Read that and we'll have one phone call with you and then we're going to discharge him and you're on your fucking own. I'll see you later.
British. Goodbye.
I'll see you later. And that's that.
I remember we went to, when we did that event at Birmingham Library, and there was a lady who came to talk to me and she said that she was in the middle of losing her parent to dementia.
Okay. Yeah.
And she said, oh, do you ever cover that? And I said, actually, interestingly, we will do at some point. That was obviously ages ago before your dad passed away or died. And we had talked about doing it, hadn't we, an episode on it? And it's just so come about now. I
told you, I was in the pub one night and ended up getting I got it on my phone, did a whole interview with somebody about her parents her mom that had dementia. And it wasn't long ago, it was only at the beginning of the summer. So I'll dig that out and see if we can use that as well.
Yeah.
But again, if there is anyone listening and they want to reach out to us, then please do.
Share your experiences.
Yeah. And I hope that somebody is listening to this episode and it's been beneficial in some way. Really do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pete Skipp, the legend. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning into It's a Death Sentence. Please keep listening to our weekly episodes.
And if you like our show, please like, share and subscribe.
We are dying to talk to you.